In today's video, I want to talk about The Strenuous Life by the 26th President of the United States, Theodore Roosevelt. The Strenuous Life is both the title of one of his speeches as well as the title of the collection of essays and addresses that he gave during his time before becoming President of the United States. While they were all published at different times and delivered for different audiences, I do think there were a few common threads throughout the book. The first common thread is the idea of unity, and the steps that we should be taking in order to preserve unity in the United States of America. Now, the Civil War was pretty fresh in the minds of most Americans. Theodore Roosevelt had been born only a couple years before the Civil War had broken out. Theodore Roosevelt brought up many points on how we can achieve unity, but the one that stood out the most to me was the idea that if we raise people all together, whether that's school children from different backgrounds, or whether that's people having interactions with one another in town or businesses, then we can have the opportunity to see people of different walks of life and get to know one another on a person-to-person basis. That will open our eyes to the fact that we are all very similar as people. Though we may face different adversities based on our financial backgrounds or other factors, we do come to several similarities that you might not see if you don't interact with people on a regular basis. Theodore Roosevelt was a big supporter of public schools, which enabled people of all walks of life, not just the rich and famous, but also those who couldn't afford to have schooling, to all have an equal opportunity to gain an education that would better themselves and enable them to go out into the world and achieve whatever it is that they desired in life. In Theodore Roosevelt's time, he felt that far too often people would divide themselves based on how much income they made. And the fact of the matter is, in America at the time, it was a fairly fluid class system. There wasn't really classes, so to speak. Sure, people were dividing themselves as upper, middle, and lower class, but ultimately, people within the same families would occupy all three of those strata. Even knowing that families can occupy all three social strata of that financial class system doesn't negate the fact that there are still issues that arise when you're intermingling people of different backgrounds. Which is why my second takeaway from the book is that it's important to develop character in a society to build it in unity. At the time, 125 years ago, Theodore Roosevelt spoke out against people who had accumulated a bunch of money and then decided to just rest on their laurels, so to speak. He felt that people ought to continue to work hard, thus the title, The Strenuous Life, and that kind of idea of once you've made enough to survive and provide for yourself and your family, you ought to pursue other interests such as exploration, experimentation, teaching, authorship, and artistry. Theodore Roosevelt was in favor of having different organizations and opportunities for people to help others up, whether that was supporting the clergy and the pastors all across the nation, or whether that was supporting different organizations like the Young Men's Christian Association or the Young Women's Christian Association. He believed that a society shouldn't be carrying people necessarily, but helping people stand back up and go on their way. He was very much in favor of charities and organizations that helped people start over, start again, or just get better at what they're trying to accomplish, and not so much in favor of organizations that were just there to provide handouts. He only really supported those sort of organizations in times of severe emergency, like flooding, earthquakes, that sort of thing. But speaking of times of hardship, that brings me to my third takeaway from the book. Theodore Roosevelt believed that there was no peace between nations without war. While that does look a little bit different when it comes people to people, when it comes to nations, there's often not as much emotion tied to peace. Theodore Roosevelt that, unlike people, nations behaved on a dominate or be dominated idea and philosophy, and that war is good for things such as getting rid of barbarianism, creating a more civil nation and creating a more civil world, but also in terms of repelling and expulsing a lot of the evils of the world. He's well known for popularizing the phrase, "speak softly and carry a big stick." What that means is you want to have both the power to go to war and go to war strongly, but to talk gently and kindly to the other nations. The big stick of heavily trained, highly trained military individuals who were very ready for war simply ensured that relations between nations would go well. The goal was not to pick a fight with anyone, but rather to increase the amount of civil conversations nation to nation. And ultimately the goal of those civil conversations was to create a peaceful world where everyone across the world could succeed and live a wonderful life. And with that said, those are my takeaways from The Strenuous Life. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you get a chance to check it out for yourself. If you liked this video, please give it a big thumbs up, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe down below, and I will see you in the next video.
Totally.